Hey guys, and welcome to the FATBOSS guide to the Jadefire Masters on Mythic.
So this encounter is a little bit of a step up in comparison to the other first bosses. The damage requirement, however, isn't all that high, and nor really is the healing aside from pretty high tank damage. With that said, we would recommend 5 healing the fight from the start, as it does act like a bit of a safety net across the fight. The fight itself has very few new mechanics, and instead the heroic spells have been buffed.
So 3 magma traps will spawn instead of 2. We use hunters and rogues to clear them up throughout the fight using turtles and cloaks. You also have 2 Zuenads spawn rather than 1. If all DPS swap to them the moment that they spawn and the fixated players stand close to the bosses just outside of cleave range, they can die incredibly quickly. To add, the raid damage from the tank debuff timing out is far more noticeable. However, the biggest difference, and likely to be the hardest part of the fight for you while progressing, is the MultiSided Strike. This now lifts everybody in the raid up into the air, apart from a single tank and a healer that are left on the ground. You'll have to have all 18 people in the raid dance simultaneously and survive the MultiSided Strike at 3 different times across the fight, possibly 4 times if your damage is low. The dance itself is identical to Heroic, except you have 5 targets to face rather than 4. This can be a little difficult to do because you are so near other players whilst up in the air, and it can be distracting or confusing with others around you. Our best advice to deal with this is just to raise your camera to a bird's eye view before you're sent up, and zoom in enough so that only your circle and images are visible whilst you're dancing. If you fail to face 1 or 2 of the images, it's not that much of a big deal, but any more than that then you are going to be dead. This ability flat out is just all personal play, and for the most part you'll just have to wait until the entire raid gets used to doing it before you can get much further into the fight. But once you have got that down, the rest of the fight is actually pretty easy.
So because the dance is annoying and probably the hardest part of the encounter, you'll want to be nuking the living hell out of the monk. The monk is definitely the most dangerous out of the 2 bosses, and the moment that she's out the encounter, it becomes significantly easier. So the earlier you kill her, the better. If your damage is high enough, it is even possible to kill the monk before she reaches 100% energy and turns into a serpent. And talking about the team attacks, let's cover the living bombs at 30 energy. So on Mythic, you'll have 3 of them. You'll want to move as a raid from one to another, killing them off as you go. During the bombs, you'll likely get traps that you'll need to dodge and quickly remove afterwards so you have space to continue to dodge the beam. On the last bomb, if you're quick enough, you should be able to kill it before the next MultiSided Strike comes in. If not, you'll have to do it during it, which isn't really a big deal because you can just move back and finish it off afterwards. It's just not ideal. Now while the bombs are up, tank explosions will be going off at the same time. This makes the incoming raid damage pretty nuts at this point. However, the time between the bomb spawning and the last one dying shouldn't be much more than 60 seconds. So if you just chain cooldowns of all the 5 healers over the course of that time, it's not difficult to keep everyone safe. Just organise the majority of your cooldowns over that time, ideally having at least 1 for each bomb that you're stacked in. Now with all of that covered, let's look at the Rings of Peace phase at 60 energy. Just before the phase starts, just like Heroic, you want to make sure that all the magma traps are cleared, and then you can begin. Now on Mythic there are 2 changes here, but the premise pretty much remains the same. The one big difference is that you need the Force Orbs to be used on at least one section of the barrier to make it vulnerable. For the Horde, you'll have 1 spawn right at the start where you're teleported, 1 near the doors where the bosses spawn, 1 over on the opposite side of the room from that, right in the corner, and the last one spawns just before the barrier. For Alliance, we don't have any footage to show you unfortunately, but we will have a map to show you on our Wowhead guide very soon, but it shouldn't really take you more than a pull to find it out yourself. And for both Alliance and Horde, these orbs always spawn in the exact same location. Now you don't always need all 4 to break down the barrier, but the more you use the better. We assign classes with high mobility, so mages, demon hunters and monks, to grab these orbs and then use life crypts and gateways to get them to the barrier as soon as possible. And it is important that you do this fast because of the new mechanic in this phase. Shortly after this phase begins, an Ox will appear near the start of the maze and will begin to move towards the barrier, trampling his way there, dealing ticking damage to anyone caught. It takes him around 40 seconds to reach the barrier, and if you're too slow, the entire raid is just going to be trampled to death. However, if you assign players to the orbs, and if the raid is quick to help those orb players get to the barrier, you can beat this timer easily by 10 seconds, if not more. As soon as the barrier is dead, the fight just continues as normal.
Now once you reach 100% energy, they'll of course transform into the Serpent and Phoenix. Now as Loz already mentioned, if your damage is high enough, it is possible to kill the monk before she even turns into the Serpent. But even if she does transform, she should die very quickly afterwards, leaving you with just the mage, who has a ton of health. At this point you just want to stack underneath him whilst dealing with the ticking damage on the raid and the tank debuff. The only other thing you have to watch out for is the magma traps, as they'll now begin to spawn pretty quickly. But even without clearing them, you should just be able to kill the mage well before the room is full. So this part of the fight is actually the easiest by far, providing that the monk is dead or incredibly low health before you enter it. You just sit there for as long as you like, killing off the mage until you get your loot. And that's the fight.
If you'd like to refresh your minds on anything we've covered in this video or would like some handy notes ready for your raid, then check out our written guides over on Wowhead. A link for that can be found in the description. If this guide helped you out, then do drop us down a like, it helps us out a lot. And of course, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Take care.